Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for joining. I'm going to invite our wonderful guest. Hi,
Hi.
Chloe. How are
Hi.
you?
Good,
Wow,
thank you.
beautiful
How are you?
background. So
Thank you.
nice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to my conversations with Olga. I know how heavy the day is for you today, especially. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking with
It's
you.
a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I can see quite a number of people joining us in. So I will just wait for maybe 5 seconds and then I will
Sure.
start. I'll start a few words about conversations with Olga. Then I will say a few words about you. And before we start our wonderful, exciting conversation, and here you go. But it's so beautiful.
Oh,
Your thing behind you is really nice.
thank you. I can't take credit for this setup. That was all Brian.
Oh yeah, he's a professional. You have to book his office one of those days to do the proper setup for myself. Well, anyway, so yeah, you sound great, you look great, so we're going to
Thank you.
start, I think.
Okay,
So don't
fantastic.
take too much time for everyone else. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening, my friends in Singapore and in Asia. Good morning, my friends and my family in New York. And good afternoon, everyone in Europe, in London and in Europe. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining me at Conversations with Olga. It's my 25th episode tonight. I will say a few words about my Conversations with Olga series. For some of you might not know, I've started the series last year during the circuit breaker with the goal to introduce friends and personalities I've met through over many years over my career to the multicultural Singaporean and global communities through a platform that is accessible and easy to follow and interesting, especially during this time. These conversations run the gamut of from intellectual and cultural exchanges to more of personal stories and how people fulfill their dreams and what do they have what have they learned over, especially over the past year. My main mission is, and hope actually, for this series to inspire and cultivate more diverse and inclusive community. So it's my honor tonight to invite Chloe Manasseh, my beautiful, beautiful, talented friend, for the episode number 25. And I will say a few words about you, Chloe, right now. And I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything, but whatever I miss, of course, we will elaborate in our conversation. Chloe Manasseh is a British artist based in Singapore and currently working between Europe and Asia. Her works evoke a sense of exotic escapism, taking inspiration from intricate patterns, the natural landscape, and the wilds of imagination. Working between paintings, print, video, and large-scale installations and sculptures, Chloe is interested in the process of how imagination can intrude on physical space, influencing how people establish a connection to it. Chloe's work has been exhibited internationally with exhibitions in US, in UK, in Italy, Israel, and of course in Singapore. She has collaborated extensively with artists, musicians, fashion and interior designers on various projects all around the world. In Singapore, many of her works adorn landmark locations such as the Raffles Hotel, Presidential Suite, Changi City Point Atrium, Facebook Singapore headquarters, and a number of other locations, which we talk about a little bit later. Well, welcome again, Chloe. I know,
Thank
as I
you.
said, you had a very, very busy day today, and Tuesdays, as you told me, are one of the heaviest days on
Yeah,
the week for you. So thank you very much.
my
I
pleasure.
would like I would like to start with your roots, with the heritage. You are dual British and Israeli nationality with a diverse family background. and I want to talk about this background a little bit. Your amazing heritage has a very profound links to Singapore. Can you tell us a little bit about your family and about your heritage?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Israeli on my mum's side. My mum is Moroccan Israeli, and my dad is actually Iraqi Jewish, and his father was born in Singapore, and his great grand uncle built many quite landmark properties around Singapore, including the Goodwood Park Hotel and Eden Hall, which is now the residence of the British High Commissioner. And my grandpa was actually born in Eden Hall. So we have very strong familial ties to Singapore. And, my grandpa, my great aunt, who is still alive, have always spoken so fondly of their time here. They were Singaporean for a time and then decided to take residence back in the UK. And of course, as many people who are, listening now know that there is a really big and dynamic Jewish community here in Singapore who share very similar roots, who originally came from Baghdad in Iraq and landed here in Singapore. My family were traders, and they traded between Calcutta in India, where my great grandparents are buried, and here in Singapore. So it really was very serendipitous to find my way back.
Unbelievable. So, by listening to you, I wonder what is your actual identity? British, Israeli, strongly rooted in Moroccan heritage, Singaporean, or all of the above? Even Indian roots you have.
Yeah, I think everything. I'm a mishmash. I've always very strongly identified as Israeli and British, because that's
Okay.
how I was brought up. But of course, when I moved to Singapore, inevitably, when I was introduced to how strong my roots are here, and of course I married a Singaporean Jewish man, I became much more Singaporean, I think, as
Yeah,
well. And I also became much more in tune with that side of my heritage. So
yes,
very multicultural, I think.
of course. Well, that probably makes you a very global citizen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being of a mixed heritage and having lived in so many parts of the world.
Yeah,
Am I correct?
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel a bit like a global citizen, and I imagine Singapore is not the last on the stop of places that will
Yes.
end up. So
Okay, well, that will be interesting for us to learn. What is your next destination?
I
um,
don't know.
I will not dawn on you with this question for now. Maybe next time. Um, much of your work is inspired by nature and the displacement from the habitat of bringing plants indoors, from what I understand. When you say displaced, do you relate to being placed in unfamiliar cultures, perhaps, and societies throughout your life? This is exactly how you've had certain times in your life and you moved from one culture to another. Tell us a little bit more about experience and perhaps how was your vision influenced and your creative process as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I traveled a lot from a very young age. My parents were originally filmmakers, so we traveled a lot with them. And I think I kind of developed that traveling bug. So when I turned around 17, I think my parents let me start traveling alone. Thank you. And I started traveling everywhere that I could. And I went to South America with friends and India. And I actually did a tracking of my family history in India. And I think what I found interesting about everywhere you go is that you look for the familiar.
Yeah,
And I think, for example, as Jewish people, in most places I visited, you could find a Chabad and you could find, let's say, Israeli travelers, which was
yeah,
always nice and also always gave you that feeling of being at home wherever you are. And I had, the privilege of being invited into many people's, personal spaces and homes when I was traveling. And, the familiarity of those spaces, people often do bring in houseplants, for example, because it's that connection to the ground, the space that we're
hmm,
living in, and that connection to the outside. Art is another very personal thing that often people bring inside, alongside the textiles they choose, the crockery they're using, the way that they've enveloped their space to create that sense of home. And it's incredibly individual and very personal, but it's, I think worldwide a very cultural phenomenon in that sense.
that's very true. You also have to have a green fingers to cultivate those plants so they don't die when you bring them from the outside to inside. Can you
Absolutely.
tell me a little bit about whether you've ever experienced the cultural shock from moving from one place to another?
I'm not sure. I haven't had the privilege of living in so many places. I've lived in three places, but I think rather than a cultural shock, but a shock of the experience. When I was living in Joshua Tree for about 3 months, for an artist residency, and I was a 25-year-old, very fresh, and I had just finished my master's, and I'm a very British city girl, and I was, put in the middle of the desert, in the Mojave Desert, in a residence by myself. The other artists were living fairly far away from me, and I had a car, I had no cell service, and internet that kind of went in and out. And that was a
Wow.
real eye-opener. I went for a morning run, and I was told not to do that with headphones because there might be a snake and I need to be able to hear it and see it. And it took me out of my comfort zone. So that was the biggest shock I think I've had in terms of adapting to a new environment.
Oh, you definitely answered my question. Definitely. I didn't expect that, but okay, that's amazing. You came to Singapore for the first time, I think, when you were around 24, 25, and you start living here since you were 27.
Yeah.
I moved also a number of times from totally different, from one culture to another, and I know how I had to reconstruct my identity and reinvent myself in a sense. Can you please tell me how did this affect you or influence you in terms of the reinvention and in terms of the sense of self?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite a humbling experience moving to a new place where you don't know anyone. And when you meet people, there is perhaps a preconception based on how you've met them as well. And I found that especially when navigating the art scene here in Singapore, I knew absolutely no one connected to the art scene when I first moved here, and yet I was doing an artist residency. So I remember it was incredibly important for me to I'm incredibly shy actually, so to get over that and
Yeah.
to really make a huge effort to meet people. And I was very lucky that very early on, whilst being here, I met some really wonderful kind of local creatives. My studio mate and studio wife, I call her Racy Lim, but she really is, one of the people who has had one of the biggest impacts on, my artistic career, I'd say, here in Singapore. And
Wonderful.
through, yeah, it was special meeting her and special meeting everyone that she introduced me to as well. So
That's great. Human connections
yeah,
undervalued sometimes, I think. And I
absolutely.
believe you recently spent some, well, not I believe, I know for sure, you spent some time in LA as well, and that wasn't a new experience for you. And when you with Singapore, did you feel the sense of belonging to this country, given that it carries so much of your history in a way?
So not initially, but it grew on me.
Yeah.
I think because I was so enveloped and so welcomed by everyone, like from the local Jewish community, from the art scene, that, I really began to feel, and now I do feel that Singapore is as much my home as the UK or Israel. And I think the warmth with which I was welcomed was really not one I was expecting. And it made a huge difference, like had a huge impact to my time here and the way that I've also equally embraced Singapore.
That's wonderful. And talking about, continue to talk about the heritage and your grandfather who was born here. And I've seen a couple of his drawings he showed me when I came over to your house for
Yeah.
dinner. By the way, you're an amazing cook. Everybody, you should know that Chloe is an amazing cook, and she cooked incredibly sumptuous Mediterranean dinner for me. And
Thank you.
you showed me a few drawings of from your grandfather. Do you think, or do you feel that subconsciously he influenced your art as well?
Yeah, I think very consciously, not
Very
even
consciously.
very
Okay.
consciously. He was a really big
Okay.
influence, had a huge impact on everything from the way I approached looking at a landscape, experiencing a landscape, and also to color.
Yeah.
My first set of oils I inherited from him, and I was very lucky because they were incredibly good quality and highly pigmented, beautiful colors, and very vibrant. Because he was an architect originally, but as a painter, he, painted incredibly vibrant, beautiful images and very surreal landscapes.
Yes.
So I think I tried almost to adopt his eye because I thought it was so wonderful.
Amazing. I can only imagine what sentimental emotions you might have when you surround your heart with all these vibes and all this energy when you visit Eden Hall, for example, or
Yeah.
Goodwood Park Hotel, and how these places resonate, I'm sure, with memories and stories about your family, isn't it? And but you
Yeah.
probably I don't know whether you still continue searching for answers or doing your family tree or researching a little bit more, but I probably assume that you would.
Yes, no, absolutely. And it's been really special to hear people in the community who remember some of my family. My great aunt, one of them lived here until she passed away, and truly had embedded herself in Singapore. And
Yeah,
it was the same when I traveled to India. I was very lucky to meet people within the Jewish community in India who also were able to share with me about my family heritage there. And I think it's a remarkable thing that could easily be lost.
yes. It's a wonderful, beautiful story, really, and I'm so glad that you found your roots here and
Yeah,
you're
me too.
part of the community, Singapore multicultural community. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. We will move a little bit to on a different subject, and we talk a little bit about the art scene and
Okay.
your creative talent. How do you keep yourself proactive in these new projects and collaborations as an artist now in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I would say I'm very disciplined. So,
Good.
especially if a new project comes along, I time manage down to the last minute. And I certainly make up for it when I have nothing on and I take my time and I relax and I recalibrate. So I think it's all about balance. I share a studio with many really wonderful local creative artists, which obviously keeps you on your toes because you see that they're all doing wonderful things and amazing projects. And, it encourages you, it inspires you to kind of up your game and be equally kind of ambitious and creative and, look for new narratives and look for new stories as well. Um,
Wonderful. You've lived in three different places and you've created art in different cultures. How do you feel the art scene in Singapore has affected or transformed your works?
it's definitely made my work smaller. um, I used to work a lot larger and, space here is smaller. It's a smaller country. I have a smaller studio. And yeah, so I've definitely downsized, and I think my parents would very much agree that this is a good thing. But in terms of ambition and scale of works, I'd say if anything, it's increased. It's really, we've been afforded some truly wonderful opportunities here that I can honestly say I don't think I would have received as quickly
Mhm.
elsewhere. And those allowed me to be super ambitious, use materials and mediums I'd never used before and had never even anticipated using, so soon. For example, as you mentioned, in the Changi City Mall atrium, I have a 15-meter chandelier, which if you told me this,
Yeah,
a
it would
couple
be
of years
hard to do
before I
some
made it,
somewhere.
I was like,
Yes.
I'm a painter, I
Yeah.
can't do that. But, when I was offered the opportunity to propose for it, I was like, well, how fun. And then, it materialized from there. And it was one of the funnest and most challenging projects I've ever worked on. So,
It's amazing. I think I believe this is probably one of the major differences between London and Israel when you were living there and
yeah,
creating it. Yes. Do
definitely.
you, well, you just probably answered this question. I wanted to ask you, do you implement trends in your work? But I guess by telling us about your chandelier, I guess maybe that was or it has been a trend as
Yeah,
well.
I'm not so much sure if it was a trend, but what? I don't know. I don't know how to
We
answer that
shall
because I
see.
think I don't consciously, look for trends within the art world, but I imagine just due to the amount that I look up and research and
Yeah,
engage with contemporary art, that it permeates into my practice. And whether it's something I'm consciously doing or not, I'm sure it's seeping in there.
got it. And do you consider timelessness is an important element in your work?
Yeah, I would hope that they have an enduring quality. I think, the power of any artwork is that people can access it in their own way and kind of, as we were talking about imagination, kind of impart their own imaginative values into that work. And I
Yeah.
don't think, much like we experience landscape, I don't think any one person will experience an artwork, be that a painting, a video work, a sculpture, in the same way. So I think, it's an incredibly personal journey. And in that sense, I do think that it's very enduring.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you. We all be well, at least me, observing a fairly new yet increasingly growing and rapidly advancing trend of crypto and its influence of art and fashion and so many other things that, to be honest, for me is a huge mystery. And what is your opinion about this trend, especially in the art scene?
Yeah, so we've had NFTs which have become, widely kind of spoken about and debated. I have to say I'm with you in the sense that I'm very new to it. I'm not the most technologically adept,
Yes.
and I'm very much a physical. I like to have my hand in the work I make. But having said that, I know many, really wonderful artists who've embraced that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we should call it a trend or not, but that form of art and that current, the current art media. And I think it's really interesting, and I'm equally curious to see where it goes. And as if I had the opportunity with someone with more know-how than I to create one, I would jump at the opportunity. Why not?
Great. Well, maybe we should look into it for both of us
Yeah,
and become a little
yeah.
bit more savvy still.
Learn something new.
Um,
Yeah.
with regards to the art scene in Singapore, do you think that Singapore art scene is facing challenges? Now that with the major art exhibitions are not really happening, at least for some time, do you think there is a negative impact of this sort of partial stagnation, I should say, that basically brings the development and maturity of art aficionados and art collectors in this community?
I think, with any industry, I imagine COVID has had a really huge impact. And I think travel in for art is incredibly important. And for
Yeah.
artists, to be able to share their work, we're very lucky that we're living in an era where we can share things digitally. And I think, many galleries and artists have taken full advantage to be able to actually reach a larger audience and have become more confident in that sense because of, the struggles with COVID and the need to engage further. Inevitably, I do think you're right. A few big art fairs and shows have closed down or not chosen to return to Singapore, and that is a shame. And hopefully, in the future that will change. But from what I've seen from my peers here, the work they're creating is outstanding. And I think, being confronted with a situation such as COVID, it actually, in many senses, promotes that creativity and that urgency to create and to kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And if anything, I think some of my peers have been more creative than ever.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you finished in a positive note. I like it.
always.
Um, I feel you're a dreamer, or your art makes me dream when I look at it, for sure. Tell us a little bit about your thought process. How did you come up, for example, with exotic escapism? What does it mean?
I think I'm just always in need of an exotic escape, even living in Singapore.
Yeah,
But when I first started making work,
especially
kind
now
of
that.
absolutely. But when I first started navigating this idea of kind of escapism, I was living in London. It was very cold, very dreary, and I'm definitely a Mediterranean-blooded person who needs that kind of warmth, not only of people, but of the landscape. And I think, the work for me was an escape, and it kind of took me somewhere else. And I was able to kind of refocus that desire to be elsewhere into the work I was making in the present situation. I think, as you said, it's even more kind of poignant right now in this time where perhaps we all do feel a little bit trapped, for want of a better word, and
Yeah.
very much stuck. And on one level, I know from some friends that it's been good in the sense that it's enabled people to set down roots and really establish stronger connections in Singapore. But I imagine that we're all getting to a point, especially for people who have family overseas and are unable to travel, that
Yes.
that need for escape, be it exotic or otherwise, is very, very much required right now. And an escape from the kind of mental burden. I think we're all very collectively anxious with COVID, and there is a
Absolutely.
need to kind of re-engage with, what brings us a bit of calm.
Yes, I absolutely agree. But how do you translate this into the compasses? How does one piece differentiate also from another in terms of the mood, in terms of the feeling, in terms of the different visions that you have, but yet it's the same kind of notion?
Yeah, so I've realized about myself that I often work in series despite myself, and I'll be working with a color palette for a series of work, and it will just speak to me at the time, and then I will shift away from that. So,
Mhm.
for example, the works I'm making at the moment are very blue and nostalgic, and they're kind of deeper and darker in a sense. And I think they're certainly commenting on perhaps the darker nature of what we're experiencing, the confrontation of our mortality and this need for social connection, which perhaps is not being met at this time in many respects. But I always have always seen my work as kind of a continuous body of like saying one thing in many different ways. So it's like a very non-coherent conversation with myself.
I love, by the way, your blue series, and I even had I spoke a little about color blue in general in one of my captions a while ago, and I'm very partial about this particular color and the mood that imposes on you or distracts you the other way. So I love what you're doing at the moment. The colors are
Thank,
amazing. But
thank
do you
you.
stumble upon a creative block at times?
Yeah, absolutely. More often than I'd like to admit. And it's painful. There's no other word for it. It is painful when it happens. That feeling of just like, I have nothing to say, which means I have a lot to say. I just don't know how to
Yes,
say it. And
yes,
that's often when I just need to take a bit of a step back and take the pressure off myself and go back to sketching or drawing or working on video and different mediums that I equally
yes,
enjoy, and that it will come naturally. And when it comes, it feels so good that I almost have too much to say and not enough
yes.
time. And then I get equally stressed because, that's just
Being a
life, I
creative
guess.
person in my own field, I absolutely can relate to it. I feel the same. Sometimes it just, I need this push, mental push, or some trigger to come out with idea that it just being born in my head. So
Yeah.
I understand that. And when you create, do you think about people, whether they would like it, or it's purely what you feel?
I try not to, but it's incredibly hard not to, especially if
Yeah,
you know that you're putting the work into the public sphere. And I think that's just, it's an everyday battle because I find that I certainly do not make my best work if I'm worried about what other people will think of it.
yeah.
And I think that can be said for any social situation. However, it's challenging because you're putting a part of yourself out there, to be kind of taken in by the public, and it will never be universally liked or understood. And that's
Yes.
just something that, is important to accept and be able to kind of work with rather than have it work against you.
But isn't it a part of authenticity? I always believe that people have to be authentic. They have to be
Yeah,
real. They have to be honest with their own selves.
yeah.
And then you just take your chances, because if you're a crowd pleaser only without authenticity, I don't think the talent will show and
Yeah.
will bring
I
happiness.
imagine it would be a very tiring process to only make works to please others.
Yeah,
So,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. You've always been interested in nature and landscapes as your key inspirations of your work. Have you experimented with any other topics and subjects?
Yes, I have. I used to make a lot of work based on trauma, and partly personal and partly from a voyeuristic standpoint, in all honesty, kind of reflecting on the sublime power of nature. And recently, that actually filtered back into the work. So if we think of COVID as, a phenomenon of nature, despite conspiracy theories, if we were to think about it like that,
Way, yes.
then we can think about it as, part of the sublime power of nature, which has both negative and positive.
Yes.
It has the power to bring a nation to its knees, many nations. But
Yes.
and then so I made a lot of work in the past reflecting on that, and it's definitely come back, kind of started permeating back into my work. But my work has certainly become more and more introspective. And more personal over the years. And initially, when I started, I perhaps wasn't brave enough to
Mm.
explore kind of more personal themes that meant something to me, and I would kind of project it outwards. And as time's gone by and I've got older, it's become more of a necessity to kind of make the works about me. But
Got it.
yeah.
And that brings me actually to the to some of your recent exhibitions in Singapore. Can you please tell us a little bit about for your exhibition in Eden Hall, for example, that I personally attended, and so many others. Just I would love to for you to share it. With us.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Eden Hall, if we start with that, was a really special exhibition for
Yeah.
me personally, because I was invited, for those who don't know, to take over the whole of Eden Hall, actually, every single room,
Can
which was
I
very
just interrupt?
kind.
for a second. I just want to tell people once
Yeah.
again who don't know what Eden Hall is. Eden Hall is the house, a residence of British High Commissioners, and where Chloe's grandfather was born. And it was built by your great grand
Uncle.
uncle. Yes, here you go. So please continue.
Yeah, so it was, if I'm not mistaken, sold to the British government right after the war.
Yes,
But my family did reside there before, and the commissioner at the time had started an initiative called Art at Eden Hall. And I was invited to be the inaugural artist to take over the rooms at Eden Hall with my art. And what was so special about this opportunity was that, I'd grown up hearing stories about Eden Hall from my grandpa, and I'd always associated it with the Garden of Eden, and he told me stories about, roaming gardens and animals everywhere. And obviously, it was
yes,
very much a more curated version when I came to visit. But, the imagination spilled over. So I had a very enjoyable time making work to fit into Eden Hall rather than to kind of make Eden Hall fit into my work. It's a very quirky building. Not all the walls are straight. Not
yes.
all the ceilings are straight. So it was a lot of fun.
Colonial building built by your family.
Yeah.
So blame
Yeah.
it on them.
They should have known. But so that was really a really special experience, and I did a lot of research then into my kind of paternal familial
Yeah,
history. And I was lucky enough recently to be afforded the opportunity to exhibit with my gallery Art Porters for a recent exhibition called Casa, which is a nickname for
yes,
Casablanca, but it's also the Spanish name for home. And within that exhibition, which happened earlier this year, I explored my maternal heritage and my Moroccan roots and kind of my identity as a Sephardic Jewish woman and what that means to me in this current stage, in this reality that I'm living in. And that was really special because, as I said, my work has become more and more introspective, but I suppose my lineage was not something I had touched upon. And it was a very personal exploration for me and a really powerful one. And yeah, and then currently I actually still I have an exhibition on right now. So for anyone in Singapore, please
yes.
go see it. But it's
Please
a
tell us, yes, tell us to give us the information. So definitely, and I've posted a few of the images,
yeah.
and it's an incredible project.
Thank
So
you. So it's a wonderful initiative by Art Encounters, who are part of Art Outreach Singapore, and they work in collaboration with the Singaporean Tourism Board. And they created this initiative, I think, over 4 years ago now, to have these containers situated in
yeah,
public spaces, and they invite artists to propose to kind of take over the containers. And I
yeah,
was, very pleased to be invited for this iteration. And I've taken over two containers in Bugis, and one is very much an exotic escape. It's multi-sensorial. There's sound, there's smell that was made in collaboration with a local scent atelier called Scent by Six, which was a very cool experience. My first foray into scents. And it's a very cool, you can walk in and immerse yourself into the environment. And then
definitely
in the
for sure.
yeah, and I think, perhaps it will provide you a little sense of exotic escape in this very kind of metropolitan place that we live. And the second container has a community canvas that anyone can go paint and try their hand at being a painter and engage with everything else everyone else has painted. It's gone through many iterations, and I've also got my paintings in there, so you can see some of the blue works that Olga and I were discussing.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, exactly. It's. I think it's a fabulous project, and it's really uh, just happy project and meaningful and
Yeah.
visually reflective. I think talking about and emotional. Talking about emotions. How do your emotions influence your work? And if you can, if you're able to, can you share with us about a few times in your life that you felt certain emotions and how it actually affected your pieces that you've created at that in those days, in those times?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a very emotional person, I think. So when I'm unhappy, it's like the worst time for me to go to the studio. I'm likely to just be very knee-jerk and not concentrating and not allowing myself to feel the process, and I'll just get very frustrated. So those are the best days for me to build. So I build my own stretches and I stretch them. And so when I'm in that kind of mood, I will like be banging the wood and stretching the canvas and doing everything I can do with my eyes shut, but it's such a good energy release.
Yeah,
And then I need to be calm. There's no other way to describe it. I turn off my phone. I, put in my headphones or watch a film or something. There needs to be background noise, and I get to work. And I normally try and block out a really considerable amount of time to be in the studio so that I have no distractions. Nothing can go wrong. And it allows me time to kind of sit back and kind of just be with my process and allow myself my mood swings. If a painting doesn't quite go to plan, allow myself to sit back and be grumpy with it and then work on it again and come back to it the
So
next
that
day.
your escape, once again, the word escape keeps on coming back.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I have it's like a tug of war sometimes, but
yeah,
wouldn't have
yeah.
it any other way.
And Chloe, you're also wearing another hat. You are a very accomplished art therapist.
Thank
And
you.
I know you have been engaged in helping so many people with their mental and behavioral challenges. When people view your work, what do you want them to feel?
Yeah, so I don't want them to feel anything. In terms of any viewer viewing my work, I don't have an objective for them. I know how I feel. I'm always curious to know how it engages with someone else. I once got asked, recently actually in the exhibition, how should I feel? And I think, that's missing the point. You should feel how you feel. If it engages with you and you feel anything, be that sad, irritated, great, go with that. And it's there's space, I think, to insert their own imaginative values, as I said, into the work. With my art therapy clients, they don't see my work, so I'm very much wearing the different hat, and they are exploring, their projections and their experiences through their own work. Yeah.
What does it mean as a process to have an art therapy session? Can you describe it a little bit?
Absolutely. It's I think very individual. So I do art psychotherapy and I work with individual clients, but if it was in a I've also done art as therapy sessions in a more kind of group environment for charities such as Very Special Arts. And in that sense, it would be more kind of art as a therapeutic outlet, whereas in art psychotherapy, it's very much like traditional therapy, but the art is used as a mode of kind of exploration, in line, with the speaking.
Who would benefit from this kind of session?
I would say anyone, really anyone. It can be from, children or, young people with anxiety or learning differences or disabilities. In that sense, it really is a very non-threatening form of therapy that I think can engage with anyone. And it's also very suitable for adults who perhaps have, experiences of anxiety, which I think many people are experiencing right now, but also trauma, and just a kind of, yeah, I think, if you're open to kind of the art aspect of it, it can be suitable for anyone. Yeah.
Thank you for that, and it's great for everyone to know and to understand the value of it. And talking about art in general, do you think anybody can be an artist? For example, to be honest with you, I'm convinced that even though I have studied history of art and I love going to the museums and exhibitions, I really have no talent in painting.
I guess that depends on how you define an artist, because of course, as an artist and art therapist, I certainly do believe that absolutely anyone can be an artist. But I think if, it depends how you define it. To be an artist as your profession, I think there does need to be a certain amount of resilience, um, yeah, within that process, because it's not always an easy one.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. There's a hope then. Who
Yeah,
knows?
absolutely.
Hey. uh,
Yeah.
New territories, new concepts, and new dreams. I try very hard not to talk about COVID and not to talk about it too much, actually, but it's unavoidable. Times have changed, and of course, the perception of people have changed as well, so are the attitudes. How does the current situation influence your art, your creative vision, your approach, and your present and upcoming projects?
Yeah, I think it's kept me grounded in Singapore, and definitely made me focus in more to where I am, and it has unfortunately at this time put a little bit of a stopper into some overseas projects that had been in the works. And unfortunately, I mean, things are opening up again, so I have hopes that these projects will kind of reemerge. But at the time, it was disappointing, in all honesty, to have some really exciting opportunities kind of for everyone just fall by. And I think, but on many levels, I think it's been really good because it's afforded me a lot of time to reassess what's really important to me, not only for myself, but also what I want to communicate within my practice. And it's also, I've been looking back at a lot of work, and I actually have some work in a show right now in San Bernardino in California. And it's work I did back in 2015. So that was really interesting to kind of look back at that piece and like think back to where my head was at then. And I can only imagine that in a couple of years' time, looking back to the work I've made now, I'll be like, oh gosh, that was your blue
Well,
period.
I hope you still like it. Do you still
Yeah,
like
no,
it?
yeah, I do. I mean, I don't think I necessarily dislike any of the work I do, but I certainly, sometimes just have to turn it around and let it sit somewhere else for a couple of years at times.
You are a visual artist. That means that your knowledge and avant-garde approach is sort of very diverse, and in a way, it gives you an opportunity to engage with different media and different technology in your creative work. Can you please share with us a little bit about these innovative projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite projects, which is ongoing, is called 100 Sounds. And it was a personal kind of passion project, I should say, for want of a better description, which started from my love of music and my love of Super 8 film. So I started playing around with my dad's old Super 8 projector, which I still have, and I started painting directly onto Super 8 film and scratching into it and then splicing all of that footage together and projecting it. And I started creating almost these like moving image paintings,
Mhm.
but they were films, and I started splicing those in or cutting them in with digital footage, and so that I could kind of take it with me. And I digitized a lot of the Super 8 footage I made. And this project has taken me everywhere, and it enabled me to collaborate with musicians. And I've done it in quite a few countries. In Singapore, I've done it 3 times actually. And the premise behind it is that I create a film in the country I'm at, which forces me to engage in the landscape and forces me to get out my comfort zone and film and explore. And then I create a film work based on that exploration, which is very abstract but has a rhythm. And I ask local musicians who may or may not have worked together before to come together in a live environment. So it's a one-off experience, and they're tasked essentially with responding to the video work through unfiltered, unrehearsed sound. So, and usually the film rolls 3 times. So for the first time, it's a bit tentative. They don't know what's coming. But by the third round, it's like they've been watching this film forever,
Yeah.
jamming together forever. And that's for me been one of the most really gratifying, art projects that I've done and I'm continuing to do, because I get to also witness other people's artistic talents and, engage with it and enjoy. I get to sit back and
Yes,
enjoy,
and
which is always fun.
energy I think, that surrounds you all creative minds. It's incredible. I
Yeah.
can relate to that as well because when I create my experiences and events, it's very important for me to create these memories, to create the happiness for people to celebrate their lives. So yet, your creations, so most of your creations are very physical art and it's
Yeah.
permanent that can be passed from one generation to another.
Yeah.
I would like to have your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for impermanent art too, and that experience. I've certainly tried digitizing or kind of documenting those moments, and it's impossible to translate. Into the camera. You had to be there in that moment to really experience the dynamism. Having said that, with art, with my paintings, whilst I think they do work in the physical realm as well, I think there's a lot missed when they're not kind of physically present.
Yeah.
So I think, it's an ongoing conversation I'm also having with myself, because, the way that we're all moving and technology is moving forward, it's important to kind of reflect on how, my practice can fit into that and whether it does.
Yes, very, very true. And a question about you as a beautiful girl, as a female artist in the art world. Is it a challenge or an advantage, or it's absolutely irrelevant?
I wish it was irrelevant. It's unfortunately not irrelevant. It is a challenge, one that I can't say I've had too much experience with. I have been incredibly lucky, I think, with the people I've met and the opportunities I've been afforded. But having said that, if we reflect, for example, on my master's at the Slade, I think it was 80% girls in my year and 20% boys, and which I think was three boys, and the rest were female. And those, male artists did, have been very successful, which does not at all, distract from how talented they are. But who's to say the 20 girls on the course weren't equally talented? And yet, not all of them were afforded equal opportunities. So I do think, I mean, that's a very personal example, but I do think, and statistics have shown, that there is, a lot of disparity in the art world between opportunities given still, and it's unfortunate, but I think it is changing.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to ask. Do you
Yeah.
think that this changed since years ago? If so, what are the current challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sense it's the same challenges to kind of have your voice heard. And I think perhaps, there's an association that can be made. For example, for me as a female artist, I've had the association made that I make botanical, floral, pretty works.
Yeah.
Yet, if a male artist was making the exact same works, he would be heralded as bold and brave for embracing his femininity. But as a female, I'm not for embracing my femininity. So it can be a little bit,
So it's a little bit of a labeling, because definitely it's still there.
yeah, you need a thick skin and you need to take it all with a pinch of salt because the right people will see through
Yes.
the French word I would like to say, and they would, and I think as with anything, it's just about kind of having the platform to be heard. There are most of the artists I know and applaud here are female, so I think Singapore is doing very well. And equally, I have many male friends who are phenomenal artists. So that's not to say that, you know, yeah. And I think gender, the
Correct.
conversation is ongoing. I think gender has become less important.
Yes.
Many
Of
people don't
course.
even apply gender to themselves. And that's a really important conversation to be having.
Yeah.
What does it matter?
Absolutely none. If you were offered a carte blanche in terms of the project for you to create, that might be you want to do and where, what it would be? What would be your
So
dream?
my dream,
Yes.
um,
If you were
my pipe dream.
basically given a carte blanche, anywhere and whatever.
Oh, I don't know. I have so many. To pick just one. I would love to do a turbine hall installation at the Tate Modern. That would be my absolute number one. Yeah.
Visualize, visualize it will
Yeah,
happen.
I do a lot one day. But I think for those who aren't familiar, the Turbine Hall is part of the Tate Modern in the UK,
Yeah.
and they do these really wonderful public engagement pieces within that, and it would be my dream.
Here you go, it's wonderful dream and visualize it will happen. And sending you my goodbye, best wishes, this
Thank
dream.
you.
Chloe, your personal style. To me, to be honest with you, I see you as a very bohemian and very romantic in terms of dressing and expressing yourself. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
think that's very fair. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. If I am to ask you to tell me a few words impromptu about your dream, what would the words or images come to your mind? Just absolutely impromptu, without thinking, intuitively.
Oh gosh. Yeah, really, I feel like I've been fed this, but romantic, exploratory, and fun.
Sounds great. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chloe, for
My
being
pleasure.
with me. And dear friends and our listeners, Chloe's beautiful, unique artwork can be seen all over Singapore, well, in very special and very interesting places. If you can mention, Chloe, once again, where can people who live in Singapore, our friends, can view your art? I would appreciate,
Yeah,
please.
absolutely. So currently it's I have two installations at Bugis Plus on the street side in two containers. If you're lucky enough to go to the presidential suites, there are some larger works in Raffles Hotel, but there are also some smaller ones in their corridors. There's a large installation at Changi City Point Atrium, and actually there's a sweet mural at Lunch Restaurant in Holland Village as well.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
cool. I didn't know about that. Well, thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. Thank you. Thank you, dear Chloe, for joining Conversations with Olga and
Thank you.
sharing with us all your incredible passion for art. I feel incredibly enlightened and inspired. And as I said, you never know, maybe one day something will come out creative from my hand, but I doubt. But thank you so much. The
Thank
conversation
you.
episode will be recorded and I will put it on my social media. I will share the link with you, of course, Chloe, as well. Please feel
Thank
free
you.
to share. It will
I
be
will.
also available on the YouTube channel on the Conversations with Olga. And please join us and stay tuned for more episodes, more exciting upcoming episodes of Conversations with Olga. And I'm wishing you very good evening and good day tomorrow and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.